Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special session organized by OMEP, the World Organization for Early Childhood Education, and EdHeroes as part of the EdHeroes Global Forum 2025. The partnerships between EdHeroes and OMEP brings together two organizations working to improve education by making it more inclusive, innovative, and centered on children's rights and well-being. This collaboration aims to connect local ideas and community experiences with global education policies, ensuring that real-life contexts influence international frameworks and decisions. The joint work has already led to shared events and advocacy initiatives, particularly focused on developing sustainable education policies that support teachers, assist families, and protect children. This session is titled Shaping Policies for Sustainable Digital Education. Today, we bring together leading voices in early childhood education to explore how digital policies can protect children's rights, promote equity, and support educators and families in an increasingly digital world. Guided by the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and General Comment number 25, we will reflect on key issues including access, digital literacy, multilingual equity, and teacher support. The session will feature 4 presentations from global experts who will share insights from research, policy, and practice. Let's begin. Our first speaker is Mercedes Mayol Lassalle, World President of OMEP. In addition to her role at OMEP, Mercedes serves on the board of the Global Campaign for Education and UNESCO's NGO Coordination Group for Education 2030. She's a professor at the University of Buenos Aires and a leading advocate for inclusive, sustainable, and right-based early childhood education from birth. Mercedes will present a human rights and public policy perspective to frame the digital education agenda for early childhood. Welcome, Mercedes.
Thank you, Camila, and thank you for this opportunity to address to the colleagues all over the world. You know that in early childhood education debates, technology often provokes mixed reactions. On one hand, there is a growing number of warnings about its risks, especially at young ages, and on the other hand, its presence is already an unavoidable reality in homes, communities, and increasingly in education settings. The question is no longer whether technology should be part of young children's life, but rather which technologies, for what purposes, when, and how they are used, all in relation to child's development, social context, and children's rights. The rapid expansion of the digital environment have reshaped social structures and dynamics, including all the ways in which young children live, learn, and relate to the world. While digitalization promises educational opportunities, it also raises significant challenges for the holistic development of young children and the full realization of their rights. Building a digital agenda for early childhood education therefore requires a critical perspective grounded in human rights frameworks and public policies that prioritizes the best interest of the child and the active role of states as guarantors. This presentation aims to address such an agenda from a comprehensive perspective, drawing from the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the General Comment 25 that was mentioned by Camila, the Tashkent Declaration of 2022, and the Gen Report on Technology of 2023. Also, the particular experience that we had during the COVID pandemic some years ago. The Global Education Monitoring, the GEM report, it is an independent annual publication coordinated by UNESCO that monitors country progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goal. In the 2023 edition, the GEM report focused on technology in education, raising a provocative question: a tool on whose terms? This question invites us to critically examine the role of digital technologies in educational systems and their implication for equity, pedagogy, and governance, especially when it comes to young children. It is particularly relevant in early childhood, a vital stage in which interpersonal relationships, plays, and physical exploration of the environment form the foundation of cognitive, emotional, and social development. In many contexts, technology has been introduced without a critical analysis of its effects during the developmental phase. This regarding both pedagogical designs and the principles of child's development. Even more concerning is the adoption of technological solutions promoted by large corporations, often lacking independent evidence of impact and implemented without consultation with children, educators, and families. General Comment 25 of the of the Committee on the Rights of the Child, it was launched on 2021, affirms that all rights must be upheld in the digital environment. The states are obligated to ensure digital inclusion, prevent harm, this is very important, and regulate digital services based on the best interest of the child, non-discrimination, participation, and the right to development. Particularly significant is the guidance regarding early childhood. In General Comment 25 emphasizes that the use of digital devices must not replace essential human interactions between children, families, and caregivers. It warns that precautionary measures are required during early childhood due to the unique characteristic of neurological and the whole development in this stage. For its part, the Tashkent Declaration on Transforming Early Childhood Education, adopted in 2022, presents a global milestone that sets shared commitments to guarantee that every child has the right to quality education and care. One of its most relevant guiding principles for this discussion is the call to make access to digital technology equitable, inclusive, non-intrusive, safe, and ethical, and to ensure the protection of children's rights in the digital environment. This commitment recognizes that technology holds the potential to innovate and transform early childhood education and care, especially in contexts where access to in-person services is limited. It can act as a bridge to inclusion, reaching marginalized children or those in remote areas. However, the declaration also clearly stresses that unequal access to digital technology can deepen existing inequalities. As demonstrated during the COVID pandemic, millions of children were included. Furthermore, overexposure to screen in early childhood can affect neurological, emotional, and social development, interfering with essential processes such as play, language acquisition, and self-regulation. Added to this are new threats linked to the digital environment, cyberbullying, exposure to harmful and violent content, commercialization of personal data, and violation of privacy rights. The Tashkent Declaration insists that ethical issues related to the use and governance of technology must be central. Therefore, transforming early childhood education and care through technology requires more than technical innovation. It demands ethical governance, democratic participation, and the critical perspective on the social and pedagogical impacts of digitalization on early childhood. The debate on technology in education, especially in the early years, became particularly intense onset on the COVID-19 pandemic. What once seems like a gradual process of digital integration suddenly became a global emergency. The pandemic accelerated educational digitalization abruptly and often improvised, laying bare in stark terms the inequalities, structural gaps, and latent risk in educational system. There are some exceptions, and because of that, Javier will expand this idea and this experience. During the health crisis, technology emerged as an emergency solution to ensure learning. However, it also exposed profound disparities, and according to the GEM report, while some households were able to maintain educational engagement through digital platforms, at least 500 million children, it says the 31% globally, were completely excluded, not only connected with the digital environment, but all the distance learning and possibilities that we have in the world. In early childhood, these gaps were particularly acute. In many countries, there were no digital strategies specifically designed for this age of group, reflected a systemic invisibility of early childhood education and care in public policies. There were attempts to transfer in-person activities to virtual settings without pedagogical adaptation or consideration for the child development principle. So the pandemic forced us to confront these tensions within the dominant educational model. A reliance on standardized solutions, lack of participatory planning, and weak institutional preparedness to respond equitable to a crisis of this magnitude. Now that the critical emergency phase has passed, the challenge is to turn that experience into learning in order to avoid repeating mistakes and to build digital policies that are fairer, more sustainable, and grounded in children's rights. So, the digital agenda for early childhood must be rooted in the human rights paradigm, recognizing the children as right holders and citizens from birth. And it is not enough to provide technological access. It is essential to ensure that technology is developmentally appropriated, respectful for early learning processes, and framed within the humanizing pedagogy. As we stated in Montevideo, together with Javier and other colleagues that were there in the presentation of the GEM report in 2023, technology is not neutral. Devices, platforms, algorithms embody ideologies, interests, and logics that serve concrete actors. Very often, technological developments are driven by commercial, not educational interest. It is essential to ask ourselves who defines technological solutions, based on what evidence, from what vision of the child, and what vision of education. So, going back to the General Comment 25, it says that the states have the responsibility to regulate, coordinate, and to evaluate digital policies that affect children's rights. And the role of state cannot be replaced by public-private partnership unless they are governed by the principles of equity, ethics, and transparency. Digital governance must incorporate fiscal justice, data transparency, and impact assessment on children's rights. So, what is the role of the educators and the communities in this? Because we have co-responsibilities. So any digital agenda for early childhood education and care must recognize the strategic role of educators as the central agents of necessary transformation. This is not about placing the burden on teachers for systemic shortcomings, but rather about designing public policies that support them, respect their professional practices, strengthen their capacities, and guarantee decent working and pedagogical conditions. The meaningful integration of technologies on ECC cannot be reduced to the distribution of devices. It requires comprehensive training with situated pedagogical approaches. So training programs should include disciplinary and didactic knowledge, spaces for dialogue, contextual analysis, and this will help to understand and to address the structural inequalities that affect educators at school and communities, and connect it with all the needs that we need to reflect and to know about the new technologies. As it is emphasized in the General Comment 25, the right to education in digital environments implies that state must measure continuous training for educational personnel so they can play an active, reflective, and protective is very important role in the digital lives of young children. Moreover, the exercise of full digital citizenship for the early years requires that children participate actively in the digital world with critical thinking from the very beginning, creativity, responsibility. To support this, educators need conceptual and pedagogical tools that allow them to guide these experiences with sensitivity, ethics, and commitments. Mariana Torres, a specialist, says the goal is not to fall into technophobia or technophilia, but to build computational literacy with a critical, inclusive, and transformative perspective. So, what conditions and proposal for the transformative digital agenda we have been thinking? The commitment adopted in the Tashkent Declaration outline a clear roadmap. Access to technology must be equitable, inclusive, safe, and ethical. Digital transformation in early childhood education should not be reduced to technical fixes or superficial content adjustment. Rather, it calls for a profound rethinking of the educational paradigm, grounded in a humanistic, ecological, and culturally responsive principles. So, we need science, we need to monitor, we need to evaluate. And from this perspective, we propose some key conditions: reframe access as a right, not as a commodity, prioritize teacher training and systemic support, design digital tools and content aligned with the best interest of the child, embracing linguistic, cultural, and territorial diversity. Inclusion must be community driven and right basis. Establish a robust regulation of private actors and foster critical thinking on creativity from the early childhood. Digitalization in education is an irreversible process, but its direction and purpose remains open to collective choice. We now face a vital opportunity to shape a digital agenda for early childhood that is truly transformative, rooted in human rights, guided by public interest, and grounded in pedagogies of respect, equity, and social justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mercedes. Thank you for the clear, important, and inspiring words and insights that you shared. Our next speaker is Dr. Dina Castro, OMEP representative at the United Nations and director of the Institute for Early Childhood Wellbeing at Boston University. Dina will speak about promoting digital literacy to ensure equitable access to early education in multilingual contexts. Her work articulates research, policy, and practice with a strong focus on language inclusion and social justice for young children. Let's hear Dina.
Hello, everyone. And I'm so honored to be sharing this panel with my esteemed colleagues from different countries, and especially from, OMEP, being part of OMEP. We hope that the discussion here will provide some insights for those of you who are listening to watching this presentation from around the world on this very important topic. Today, my presentation will focus on how diverse we are, especially linguistically and culturally in the world. Here are our beautiful babies. It's particularly, I wanted to mention that forced migration, as we all know, is a global phenomenon right now. Humans are moving, and in particular, what is happening, unfortunately, they are forced to move because of political or domestic violence, wars, climate change, natural disasters, and just the need to survive and find a better place for them and to raise their kids. So, and the influx is increased influx of migrants and refugees, and especially those in the South, Latin America, Africa, from also Asia, and of course the Middle East, to the global North, to North America and Europe. And I'm in the United States, and this is the country that receives about 20% of the world's total international migrants. So there's a very diverse country. So the consequence of this migration is an increased linguistic and cultural diversity around the world, especially in the children that are served in early childhood programs. Those in the U.S. alone, a third of the child population of ages 0 to 8 are speakers of languages other than English. Why they talked about language and culture, and what's this? Are those important? We know that language is more than a communication tool, or it really carries the culture of the family, the culture of the community, of a community where these children are coming from. So therefore, language is integral part of these children's developing their cultural identities and the sense of self. So is very, very important. It carries the traditions, the wisdom of the generations, a way of seeing the world. We call it in Espanol, the cosmovisions, the way of seeing the world of communities. So as I said, it's more than a tool to communicate ideas. It communicates a way of living. Unfortunately, there are communities that are being minoritized and marginalized when they migrate, and within their countries. We talked about linguistically diverse populations within countries, for example, indigenous populations as well, that whose languages and cultures are marginalized or discriminated in the societies where they live. So language has become, or has been for the history of humans, a tool for discrimination. So this is unfortunate. How is that reflected? That when I refer to language discrimination or linguistic racism, we're talking about policies that are assimilationist policies that do not deny the opportunity for these communities to preserve their languages and cultures. Well, here we always have to go back to remind ourselves of the children that we served and for whom we are doing this work. This is just wanted to share these photos from an early childhood program in a Quechua community in the Andes of Peru. I'm originally from Peru, and very connected in the work also in early childhood in my country of origin. So these photos are from a visit. So these are children from a Quechua community. In Peru, we have intercultural bilingual education programs. So we are hoping that with the goal of preserving the indigenous languages and cultures. So talking about bilingual development, just some science, a few comments about or facts from science related to bilingual development. First of all, the experiences of bilingual children occur across different sociocultural contexts. So sociocultural context is important, and those experiences are unique. Bilingualism affects all domains of development, sometimes especially when we are thinking about children in immigrant communities, for example, or children from indigenous communities that move from rural to urban settings. The concern of the educational systems or the early childhood programs is to teach them the dominant language as soon as possible. And what happens with the consequence of that is that they end up eliminating this children's family or community languages, original or first language. So, and the concern is that if they preserve their first language, they will be behind in their development. Well, bilingual neuroscience and bilingual research in particular is demonstrating that never happens. To the contrary, bilingualism is a positive experience that can stimulate cognitive development and different areas also of social development and, of course, language development. So bilingualism is not a threat to development. It's not a negative characteristic. Although I have to say that sometimes we think about that we have a double, I would call it double standard when we talked about bilingualism, because for those speaking dominant languages that want to add another majority or dominant language, I'm talking about languages like English, French, or European languages. For those communities, being bilingual or multilingual is an asset, and nobody questions that. When we talked about indigenous communities or migrant communities coming from low income, backgrounds, for them is a problem. Bilingualism is a problem, and we try to eliminate their first languages. So there's things that happen beyond science that doesn't have to do with what science have demonstrated, and is more ideological, definitely. Well, Mercedes was, of course, making reference to those and the international policies that are in place that support digital literacy. I'm getting to the digital part. And I just wanted to mention a few of references in these policies that talked about the importance or protecting or promoting the preservation of mother tongues in languages and cultures. And just to remind everyone that we are now in the International Decade of Indigenous Languages until 2032. So we hope that there will be some global initiatives happening and state initiatives happening to support indigenous languages. So what does all of this information, means for early care and education in a digital world? So definitely how we define high quality early care and education is important, and it needs to take into account the unique linguistic and cultural experiences of children. I think that's one important point. So there is no one size fits all in early care and education. We need to incorporate the individual experiences and the community experiences of the children, including their languages and cultures. The early education for bilingual children is not only about teaching them a second language, I just mentioned that, or translating the curriculum content, because the content of the curriculum, and I think this is, I want to be emphatic about this. Unfortunately, we still have in many places, especially in communities who are multilingual and multicultural, we still have curriculums in early care and education that are Eurocentric and monolingual. So have been developed thinking about with monolingual people. And so there is a risk of the world becoming a monolingual, monocultural environment. And I think if we think about the digital world, that's even a larger threat. Again, to bring us back when we're talking about, thinking about the digital world, this is a group of our Hong and 1P early educators in the Amazonia of Peru who were participating in a professional development workshop. Yes, this is for us to remember that these are the teachers we have to think about when we're talking about access to the digital literacy. So digital literacy, definitely a foundational skill in the 21st century. So we cannot deny that. But the goal should be to use these tools to promote critical thinking, creativity, right, and responsive, and definitely need to be used with responsible engagement. For early learners, it needs to be age appropriate, content appropriate, and culturally to support. It's an opportunity to support multilingualism and cultural responsive teaching. As I said, there is a risk, though, that reproducing the content of the digital literacy materials and supports that are available will be, again, coming from the global north and developed and transferred without any attention to context in environments where, they will be promoting definitely just this. And again, the standardization, let's say, or a world that is homogeneous. And so that's the something that I want to call attention to, because that's a risk. Let's talk about the intersection of digital literacy and for equitable access. So there are digital tools can really be help break barriers and provide tailored learning experiences in multilingual context. For example, here I'm giving some examples in terms of access to resources, perhaps online libraries, providing diverse educational apps, talking about diverse linguistic and cultural, reflecting the different cultures, interactive ebooks. I'm going to share a couple of an example of working with interactive ebooks in intercultural context. Then personalized learning, adapting, platforms that cater to individual language. Now with digital tools, we can identify content for the different levels of language proficiencies of people, and of course, adapting to their learning styles. It can help address language differences in multilingual environments we have, and nowadays it's not really rare to find early childhood classrooms that in which children are coming from different language backgrounds, so they have their well, I'm in Boston, for example, Massachusetts, and we have classrooms that have children from they speak 15, 20 different languages, and there is one language of instruction. So we work with teachers and prepare them to provide an environment in which the children's individual first languages, mother tongues, are supported, as well as all of them, are learning a second language. So the digital tools are helpful, can be helpful for that. Of course, the priority should be to provide teachers with the support that they need. So multilingual professional development also. We have teachers who are themselves bilingual or multilingual. So, and they also need materials and supports for them to work with multilingual children, and but also to give them access to content, share lesson plans and communication tools. Some strategies here, I was mentioning interactive ebooks and apps, voice recordings and dictation tools are helpful, also are available. Digital storytelling that could allow a way to allow children to create narratives in their preferred language, or not in one or perhaps more. We're talking about translanguaging here, which is something common among bilinguals. So not to refrain children from using their mother tongue in an early childhood environment, or mix that with their second language as well. So teachers need to be skilled to be able to work with children in these type of programs, or provide those type of experiences. Create online communication platforms that can facilitate, in particular, communication with multilingual families. Educational games that promote bilingualism, not only and biliteracy through play in various languages, and virtual field trips. Now we have, the virtual realities in our hands. So that's another way we could use it to expand, horizons beyond physical limitations, also including multilingual narrations options, for example. These are just some examples. I wanted also to mention, didn't want to forget to mention families in this context and the support that they need to be able to use these digital technologies with their children. Yes, so they're here to support empower parents and communities. So they will need some support. So how to engage in the use of digital literacy is important. Provide the translator resources I was mentioning that will increase homeschool communication with apps, Community digital hubs, for example, can be helpful and made available in multiple languages, and of course celebrating families' languages. Encouraging them to use digital tools to create to support a multilingual and a multicultural environment. And this is very important because especially when we have families that come from minoritized, marginalized communities, what they tend to do, unfortunately, is they make the decision to not continue, not to teach their kids, not to speak to their kids in their mother tongue, in their family language. And they decide that for their children to be successful in the new community, they need to speak the dominant language in that community only. And so they sacrifice, I would say, the opportunity of communicating their cultural heritage to their kids in their home language, in their family language, right? And with the consequences that later in life will have for their children as adults, even in mental health. And this will be the topic for another conversation, but there is definitely research that documents that the impact of losing your first language and your social emotional well-being. Challenges, the implementation to ensure I was talking about teacher training, equitable access to devices and internet connectivity. This is crucial if we want to promote equity in access to digital tools. Definitely what I've been mentioning is the content, the quality of the content and the cultural relevance of the content is going to be very important. And sustainability, we need policies that will support, but also we will need to secure funding for the long-term support for digital initiatives. So we have policies in place, but we need to put, as we say, and the people say in the US, we need to put the money where the words are, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. But point is that it's not enough to have the policy, the written policy. We need to make sure that the funding is available, is put there. A couple of experiences I wanted to share that I'm participating in. In the United States, we are working with a group. Collaborating with a team of colleagues that are designing digital games to support language-rich interactions in multilingual adult and child diets. And this is targeting parents and grandparents and multilingual families. So how they can both support the first language, to communicate the first language, as well as the learning of the second language in young children. And the second experience is collaboration in Saudi Arabia with experience with digital picture books that are focusing in particular how we can support children in learning their knowledge and changing their attitudes, or generating a positive attitudes towards children with autism in inclusive classrooms. So that experience has been amazing in using digital picture books. So I think we have talked about this already. The policy support, professional development, research and evaluation is very important to have in mind. All initiatives should have a research and evaluation component so that there is a continuous assessment of the effectiveness of the digital intervention. Especially being so new, we need to generate data that will tell us, give us some direction. So if what is working, what is not, and how do we improve. And of course, collaborations and participation of the community in any initiative. That's very important. The voices of the communities, the community leaders, as well as technical developers. But we need to have the feedback and make sure that digital initiatives are culturally grounded. In a way of concluding some thoughts, it's just definitely digital literacy is a powerful tool to ensure all children, regardless of linguistic and cultural backgrounds, have the opportunity to thrive in early childhood and beyond. And I would say, as we have been discussing, we need to, this will give them enhanced access to education, of quality education, personalized learning, and empower families. So those should be our goals. Definitely, I would call for embracing technology, but in a responsible way, and to promote inclusive and socially just learning environments for all children. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very interesting, Dina. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, for bringing up this perspective. Thank you very much. We will now have a short break, and we will continue in a few minutes.